Welcome to episode 2, season 1, Walking Between Shadows. I'm Ben Elliott, and this is my wife, Taryn.
Hi.
First off, we want to start with a message. We do not make personal attacks on anybody, and we don't expect anyone from our audience to do it. If you do that, you'll be removed from the comment section on YouTube or from our Facebook feeds, and you will not be allowed back in. This is a podcast about information that's already out there and new information that's developed as a result of the initial investigation. So anyone that wants to make it personal, then just don't waste your time on our channel or on our Facebook pages, because that's not what this is about. We're not seeking fame and fortune. We're here to represent two people that lost their lives and a family and friends that need help or finding answers.
Right.
That's what Walking Between Shadows is about. So with that being said, Taryn, episode 2, season 1, and this is Deborah Harris and Ambria Halliburton, a mother-daughter pair found murdered in their house in April of 1999.
Right.
So with that, if you want to recap, let's just do a quick recap of everything.
I think last week we got all the way up till... So we got to the day of the murders, and that was on Easter Sunday. So, we went through all that, and I think today we need to go through a little deeper dive of Debbie and Ambria, so maybe we can figure out why these people were around her and why she was where she was at this time in her life.
Sure.
Okay.
Sure. With a little bit of local news that's going on right now, and the reason we feel like it's necessary we have to report on this or keep this out there too, is it may actually cause some hindrance or disruption or even slow down this process all over again, that we get answers from anybody or that the family gets answers from anybody. So last Thursday, news broke that the FBI had search warrants for the Gibson County Sheriff at not only the Sheriff's office in Trenton, but also at his private residence and at a place called Alliance Staffing Group and the Orchard House in Milan. And so we know that the FBI went into Paul Thomas's, that's the Gibson County Sheriff, went into his house and went into the Sheriff's Department, and that was on the day of his swearing-in ceremony after the recent election for his next term. That's where they did this?
That's where they ran in?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And so we just want everybody to know what's going on, and you know, again, we're concerned that this may be a hindrance or actually slow this process back down, but we're going to keep it out here in the public. That news was broken by the Jackson Sun newspaper and WBBJ News Channel 7 out of Jackson. So knowing that, I looked up the Orchard House in Milan just to see what it was, because I didn't know what it was. And according to the Secretary of State from the state of Tennessee, Trey Hargett's office, and this is public access information, anybody can go on and look a business up. I couldn't find anything on the Orchard House right away. I'm not saying it's not there, but what it did point to by going to the website was this company called Alliance Staffing Group, LLC. And so it says in here that that was filed in, or the company was filed in February of 2020 was when they initially filed to do business in the state of Tennessee, and that they have filed an annual report as of March 17th of 2020 and February 28th of 2021. It says that the company was organized with 5 members, and 5 members means that that's probably 5 people that are listed as owners or managers of the company. But the only principal that was listed or manager member was a guy by the name of Walker Huey out of Milan, Tennessee. And the address it gives is 1141 South Main Street, Milan, Tennessee. But the office for this company, Alliance Staffing Group, is actually in Trenton, and it's right off Court Square. But again, when all of this was done by the FBI, this was one of the things they were looking into, was the Orchard House. And when you go to the website that is the Orchard House, it's actually just a landing page that's on Alliance Staffing Group's main webpage. So you go to this website and it's Alliance Staffing Group, and then, like I said, there's a little box you click on about the Orchard House, and it goes over into the Orchard House and tells the story that it's a faith-based transitional home, and it's a transitional program in Milan that helps incarcerated people transition into the workforce and back out into public life.
Kind of like a halfway house, or
halfway house
staffing company for parolees.
Right. And so the Gibson County Sheriff was quoted in this article that he sees a major drop in recidivism following this groundbreaking reentry program. And as of April 21, 70 incarcerated people were enrolled in the program. Both Alliance and Orchard House on Thursday refused to comment to anybody from the Jackson Sun or WBBJ about the search warrants or the activity the FBI had done. They also reached out to Sheriff Paul Thomas and failed to get comment from him as well. So again, this is, I don't want to say trendy, but you can't help but to say that that our Sheriff's Department's under investigation by the FBI right now. So it may slow down our process of finding closure for this family.
And this case that we're highlighting right now, the Deborah Harris and Ambria Halliburton case, this was 23 years ago. And we were around then, in Trenton. And the corruption then has put a major hold on a very important case. And we will talk about, we even called the Sheriff's Department, which we know on open cases that we're not going to get much information.
If anything.
If anything at all. We get most of our sources are friends and family and people that were around during this time. And some of them have made statements to the police, and some of them have not. But we called the Sheriff's Department, or you talked actually to the
Chief Deputy,
Danny Lewis.
Danny Lewis.
Okay, and he stated that this case was recently wrapped up, solved, and the person who did this. Well, at first he stated that a lot more people came in 2018 and gave clear statements of what was going on with people around that time. But he also stated that this was solved and wrapped up, and that the person who did this had passed away recently. So,
well, and he also said if you want any information about it, talk to the general, which is the District Attorney General,
which that's
Trenton, Gibson County,
right?
And that's not going to happen.
No.
I've tried, but that's not happening. The other thing is, he was pretty adamant that it was wrapped up and that the guy had passed away in prison a few years ago. And in talking to Deborah's little brother, Tommy, Tommy says that same statement was given to him back in 2017, 2018. Again, when this thing came to the public view and everybody thought, well, they're reopening it, maybe they'll get closure now. But, Tommy said it was repeated to him or said to him almost verbatim to what we were told that day on the phone by Danny Lewis. And I don't know if Danny was the chief deputy back then. He may have been. I didn't ask him. That was on a Friday, and he was in a hurry to go, and I think we were too. But, that's the feeling we get here, is that this case in many people's eyes is still wide open. And when officials won't talk about it, then that indicates to me it's probably still open. But then you get one of the highest powered law enforcement officers in the county on the phone, and he says, well, we've wrapped that up.
Right.
And I'm pretty sure that was wrapped up.
And after speaking to Tommy, we found out that he was told the same thing. And a couple other people that made statements were told, at least one I know of, was told the same thing. And we talked about last week Tommy Lynn Sales, and how he had been ruled out in 2002, I believe, by Joe Shepard and Jimmy Hand,
which then was the sheriff and the lead investigator on the case.
Correct. So I think today on this episode we should go a little bit deeper with Debbie and Ambria and kind of talk about that.
Sure.
So a little bit of their past. Debbie was born in Tennessee in February of 28th of 1968. Her parents were Jeannie Horton White and Darrell Barnes of Humboldt. Tommy is her brother, Tommy Gilliam, and her sister is Doris Hill Bailey. And I believe she's in Humboldt as well, or was in Humboldt at the time. Debbie had a rough childhood, I would say. Her mother suffered from alcoholism, and you know what goes along with that in a home with children. It's a lot of responsibility on a child. And Debbie kind of took Tommy under her wing as her own, and tried to protect him a lot. And he has a lot of stories of how she would try to get him away from the fighting between their mother and stepfather. And Debbie that seems to be the beginning of a cycle of chaos in Debbie's life. When Debbie was 16, she got pregnant and had a daughter by the name of Serena, and married Serena's father, Gary Book, soon after.
But at this time, she was back down in Louisiana.
She was in Louisiana.
Yeah, so she had left Tennessee.
Right.
And that's where she met Gary and had the first child. And then they got married after that first child.
They did. They got married, and then soon after the marriage, they had a set of twins, Sierra and Jamie Book. And so, from what Tommy has told us, this was kind of a toxic relationship too. Gary was abusive and had threatened Debbie one time for sure. He put a gun to her head and threatened to kill her. And she was having a little party or something after, while he was at work, and he came home. And that's when that incident occurred. So soon after that, Debbie divorces Gary, and Gary gets full custody of the three girls. And Debbie's mom passes away from a drowning accident in Louisiana. So Debbie comes back here to Tennessee, and she meets someone and gets pregnant with Ambria. And Ambria was born on August the 16th of 1990. And we've been told by a couple people, family members and friends, but her biological father was a man by the name of Billy Harrison. And I guess that relationship didn't work out for whatever reason. And she soon met Brian Halliburton. And I guess some of that childhood trauma and chaos, and she had started drinking. And so after she had Ambria, and she started going to AA meetings, and that's where she meets Brian Halliburton. And that's her second husband. And we've kind of hit a brick wall with Brian and Halliburton as far as finding out much about that. I think they might have had a different set of friends and family that, just kind of went their own way. So like I said, it's been kind of hard finding out anything about Brian Halliburton. After Brian Halliburton, and he adopts Ambria, and they divorce, and that enters her third marriage. Here comes Jamie Harris. And from what I've heard from friends and family close to Debbie, is that relationship was very toxic and abusive. And every time, Debbie'd want to leave, Jamie would threaten to take Ambria away from her. Or he would beat her. And friends have stated that they had seen Debbie with black eyes and, broken arm and injuries. And it was the on again, off again relationship where they were, constantly on and off. So it leads us kind of to where was she during this time of the murders, emotionally and mentally and physically too. So her and Jamie had separated, and she moved back in, and she was going through financial hardships, and we found out that since last week when we put on the show that we didn't know whose car or whose Beretta that was in the crime scene photos and outside that was at Debbie's house the day of the murders. And we have found out that Beretta came from a buy here, pay here used lot that the Buick had broken down, and Debbie had to get another vehicle to get back and forth transportation wise. And Jamie had Debbie's phone shut off the week before the murders. So it kind of kept, we don't really know if Debbie was unable to talk to her family because she didn't have a phone, and maybe some of her other friends. But at this time, Christy Frame was around Debbie and Ambria. And Christy...
But why did he have her phone shut off?
Well, they were separated. So, I mean, he didn't want to pay a phone bill for someone that he wasn't with, and he wasn't living there.
Yeah, and they had moved out of the trailer, and
right.
She had just come back to it.
Right.
Okay, Jamie was living somewhere else, but she and Ambria had come back to the trailer.
Right.
With no phone because it had been cut off.
Right. And it kind of she, at the time, before she had moved back into the trailer, she was living with her uncle, William Lott, and that was in Humboldt. And we'll just throw in some information that was given to us too with that. We were talking about Jamie and Debbie's relationship and how it was turbulent. And during that time, I'm not sure if she was speaking to her family as much and other friends besides a friend by the name of Christy Frame who gave us some information about the car, which we just talked about. And then told us that Jamie had the phone shut off the week before the murders. Mm-hmm. And I was told he had the phone shut off. They were separated. He had moved out. He was living at a different residence and probably just didn't want to pay 2 phone bills.
Right. And she was living at a different residence.
Right. So before she had moved back into the house out on the trailer out in Caraway Hills, she was living with her uncle. Her and Ambria were staying in Humboldt with her uncle William Lott, and she was said to be seeing a black man at the time, and it was a different time, and her uncle threw her and Ambria out at the time. So
he didn't approve of the relationship.
He didn't approve, and so she went back to Caraway Hills. So, and the phone was shut off, and she had picked up a second job at Piggly Wiggly working in the bakery. And Christy Frame stated that on March 29th, which was the last day that Debbie was seen alive by her landlady, Dawn Patterson, Christy and Debbie and Amber were to go have dinner that night. And I guess plans just didn't go through, and Christy knew that she didn't have a phone, so I guess she just kind of said, okay, well, maybe she didn't want to come, or she got busy. So the next day, Debbie was to pick up Christy's son and babysit him that evening. She was supposed to pick him up at 2:30 that afternoon and keep him till a little after 11, I guess, if Christy was getting off work at 11. And Christy was working in the bakery too at Piggly Wiggly. And on Thursday, April the 1st, Christy and Debbie's boss at Piggly Wiggly asked Christy to go by and check on Debbie because she hadn't showed up at work. And I don't know if Christy did or if she didn't. She
didn't elaborate.
Did she not? Okay, so she wouldn't go any further with that. But did say that in the next couple of weeks she would let people know at her when she felt like it, I guess.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
So anyway, we'll go on with that. And so there's this turbulent relationship between those two, and some things that we did find out from statements that were given to the police that during this time was, we talked about last week when they went from when Jamie and 2 women and another man on Easter Sunday went and picked up the dogs that were bleeding, even the one that was bleeding or had been bleeding a couple days before when the vet tech got a phone call, and went riding. We talked about that. And also in that statement, to the police, one of the females stated that Jamie Harris did not get in a fight with anyone. And we weren't sure about why that was, but we'll kind of come back to that. Because another thing that was stated by Christy Frame is that the blood that was found that we talked about last week in Jamie's van was tested and found to be dog's blood, according to her. And also the blood wasn't from a dog vomiting, but it was from a dog going into heat. So that's one story. Then we'll go to the vet tech statement that was given to TBI in 2018. And she stated that Jamie called her around March 30th or 31st in the middle of the night. And she's adamant about that. And he stated that he said that the dog was vomiting blood and it was everywhere. Jamie never told me the van specifically. He just told me blood was everywhere and in the carpet. Another statement given to the police during the same time frame was made by a man by the name of Bob Rowe, who is deceased now. He claims he saw Jamie at Little General and stated and reported to the police he had blood on the door of the van and some injuries. Jamie said he had took the van home from a bar. I took a man home from a bar that night, and they had gotten a fight on the way home.
In his van.
In the van.
Mm-hmm.
So that was the statement that was given to police from another witness. And I want to talk a little bit about why, in the statement made by the two girls and the guy that went to Paris Landing and were riding around with Jamie, why would they say that he was not in a fight?
Yeah, I mean, to me, that means investigators noticed scratches, cuts, something on his hands, his face, his neck, and wanted to know where they came from. Did they come from a dog attacking him? Did they come from a fight he'd gotten into? And who was that fight with?
Right.
And then suddenly you have these two that were with him the day before or day of that say they didn't witness him get into any fight because they'd been in a club with him the night before and they'd been with him all the next day. So when they were asked, their statement said he didn't get in a fight.
No, that's what they said. There was no fights. I mean, and so that kind of leads us to the next, the blood. The blood that was found in the van, the vet tech said that when Jamie called her that night, and she has a witness to that as well, someone that was there and that's still around. So he didn't specifically say it was just in the van. He said it was everywhere and in the carpet. So that's another thing, that just seems kind of odd to me. And we talked about it. I talked to her recently, and she did not make this statement in 99. She thought that this was so cut and dry of who did this that it wouldn't be.
There was no need for her to add.
Right.
She didn't feel like it was necessary for her to add.
Right. But when she went back in 2018 and told the TBI officer about this, she said he responded in a way of shock almost, because he did admit to her that they had found bottles of bleach and peroxide in the van and in the ditch behind Debbie and Ambria's trailer. So that was, people were questioning that as well as to what that is. Another statement that was made by someone was that Jamie was seen around the 30th or the 31st at a birthday party of a guy over in Gibson with the initials of S and S. That's all I know. And so that was another thing that was stated too, that he was seen there, and each one of these statements beside it had that he did not get in an altercation with anyone. So if I don't know when that would have been, but
Yeah, I mean, any time in those days leading up to this, if he'd made a statement about having been in a fight, kind of like saying he'd been in a fight with a guy he picked up in his van to take home, and they got in a fight in his van. I mean, if he'd been in a fight, he probably made a statement towards that. And then when the investigators saw him for the first time, maybe they noticed physical marks that looked like he'd been in a fight.
right.
And yet these witnesses are saying that he had not been in a fight. And these witnesses had been with him in the time frame that he may have made the statement that he was in a fight.
Right.
So it just kind of boils down to, a matter of the timing of his statement and the timing of their statement. And who knows what they think because of that. We only saw a partial piece of that statement there too. So we don't know what else was added.
Right. And I think next week we need to go into a little bit more about who was surrounding her and the circumstances of their relationships too. Because we do know this was a crime of passion. We do know that in 2002, after Joe Shepard and Jimmy Hand went down to interview Tommy Lynn Sells before he was executed in 2014, they ruled him out as a suspect even. I mean, he did not do this. But to this day, Debbie and Ambria are still listed as his victims.
All right.
So, to me, if Debbie was said to have fought her attacker, and there was DNA under her fingernails, and it should be cut and dry at this point. If Tommy Lynn Sells have done this, they would be able to match that DNA to his from the CODIS, is that what it's called? From that system, because he would be in there. I'm just, so that part I'm confused about as to why, that they haven't tested the DNA under the fingernails. If that wasn't just something that was.
Well, we don't know that they haven't because we have two people, myself included, that have statements from the Gibson County Sheriff's Office that it was wrapped up. They know who did it, and he died in prison a few years ago. And so, again, like you say, Tommy Lynn Sells was probably in the CODIS database by then because he had been involved in so many other cases. I think they said like more than 30 cases suspected and as many as 20 or 22 that they confirmed he was probably the perpetrator of. So good chance he was in CODIS, and if he was in fact the perpetrator, they should have been able to match that. And again, we're seeking closure here for the friends and family of Deborah and Ambria, and we don't understand why they wouldn't say that. I mean, Tommy Lynn Sells died in prison in 2014 as a result of lethal injection. Who cares if it's made public knowledge now?
Exactly. I mean, it will also take the spotlight off of people that are presumed guilty at this point. And to walk around innocent and have that shadow over you is not something anybody wants to have to go through or should have to go through if they have the answers they need.
Right.
So if the sheriff's department has the answers that this family needs, I don't understand why they won't tell either.
Right.
If it's a matter of public safety, then I do not understand what the problem is, and that it's very frustrating. And I know it's frustrating for her family and friends that loved her.
Well, that's our goal with this. Our goal with this is to get the message out there and hope to gain closure for friends and family, especially those that have waited 23 plus years now for it.
Right.
So that wraps our episode today up about Deborah and Ambria, and we're just going to continue talking to the sources that we've been talking to, and we're going to continue to try to seek more sources. So anyone out there that has any information that may help in this case or any case that's still open or cold, feel free to contact us or the Gibson County Sheriff's Office anonymously. And the Gibson County Sheriff's Office phone number is area code 731-855-1121. And you can email us at the Walking Between Shadows podcast and YouTube channel at wtnknows@gmail.com. So wtnknows@gmail.com. So for next week, we're going to dive into some more detail about Deborah and Ambria. And just to let you know, we're already working on the next season, which is going to involve what's called the video store murders from October of '91 in the same area, Gibson and Carroll County. And it involves a lot of the same investigative people that were on the Deborah and Ambria case. So again, we're going to try to continue to dig this stuff out and just keep it out there so people can talk about it and maybe hear something or like I said, contact us. Please contact us even if you're scared to reach out. You will remain anonymous. You can contact us anonymously. I'm not computer savvy, so I don't really know how to do that. But again, I want to say also thank you to everyone who's tuned in and who continues to watch us. And please don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button. This has been Elliot and my wife Taryn for Walking Between Shadows.
Thank y'all.